Welcome to Self-Perfected.
Are you?
Yeah,
Christ is here.
All right.
Hey, we're live. This is
Should
crazy.
we cue the intro?
Always.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, we already did it.
It's done.
Yeah, I feel like it should always be done at the start now. Just make it easy,
Okay.
right? Hey, everybody.
I really do like
Hey.
keeping people on edge, though. I love how some people are explaining to us, like, yeah, I'm driving in the car, and then I'm like, when's it gonna drop? And then it's like way too loud for them. I love that.
And
shit.
they fucking scurry and like get into car accidents and stuff. And then,
Whoa, Asif, careful.
Well,
with
I'm
that.
spelling people. I'm cursing people.
Don't speak it, otherwise it will become true.
Right, because you
Hey,
are
by
all
the
out
way,
effect to my words. Go ahead.
Just real quick, I want to give a shout out to Kian.
Oh,
I saw him driving that Lamborghini in Dubai,
fuck
Yeah.
and I was like, look at how much he's grown.
Yeah, dude.
He's
Yeah.
able to drive a car like that and not total it. I was just like, wow. Wow.
You know what's
He's
actually
changed.
crazy?
That's the proof in the pudding right there.
You know what's actually crazy though? He used to talk about driving Lambos in Dubai when I was 14 years old and he was 16 years old.
wow.
Wow.
Really?
Like, I just want everyone to process that for a moment. You can live your dreams.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and it was like comical, right? Because it's just like an idea that you play with for fun of like, yeah, we should be like fucking driving Lambos in Dubai and shit. Like that's how he would say it, you know? And he actually did it.
Literally in Dubai driving.
Plus-
He had
plus
two
the-
Lamborghinis on that bridge.
The part he wasn't even aware of that would make it way sweeter is being there with his wife.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know what
That
I mean?
picture with him on one side and then
And Miguel on the other?
side sitting on it. I was
Beautiful.
like, wow, great
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah.
Perfect.
With like the bridge in the background.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Dreams do
Yeah.
really do come true, guys. We have 5 live.
Hey, not all dreams though.
Megan
If you don't have
says,
techno tutor,
lol,
you're gonna
oh,
fuck it up.
Kiki.
Kiki. I love having Christine read the comments.
I like the updates from Christine
Yeah, Christine.
from C.
Christine.
Sea
Wow.
dog, sea dog.
So
Yeah,
that
okay.
Hold on, let's take a moment to appreciate the waffles that Christine.
There's a better picture on my
Dog.
profile about it, but it's fucking amazing. It's
Wow.
so good.
Dang.
Homemade.
Dang.
Just did it.
There's a better picture on your profile. How did that picture already get there? Like she literally just handed those to you.
Drake is
I
quick
know.
with it.
I wanted to let everybody know right off the top.
So let's jump into it. We're going to talk about the lack of God in people's lives and nihilism. Right?
Yeah, that was. We want to start off light.
Well, hang on. On that point about the Lambos in Dubai, it is so great because now we can have this even recorded here as proof of like, hey, we're gonna be in the World Economic Forum and like, hanging out with those guys and then selling them on doing what's best for all. So,
Nice.
Exactly.
And
United
we'll be like, guys,
Nations.
remember when we were just talking about that stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm like,
Now we're actually doing it.
yeah, like picture with Klaus Schwab. I'm like, guess who's our newest TT client?
And he's signing away because he can't read either. Like,
Yeah. That's so epic.
he can't read either. So he's just signing on to whatever we say
Yeah.
because we're the people in charge. He's like, yes, that sounds very good. Build back greater. I like that. The sound of that.
Build back
very well.
best.
Build back best.
Yes, for all.
yes.
Hey.
Also
Control
vaccinate
the
ourselves
class.
against what is not best.
You know, I just had this thought earlier because I was flipping through my YouTube feed and I saw this video about like the coming collapse of China and all this stuff, and I was like, realizing people get into this whole like, oh, anti-China thing, but it's like China can't sustain
anti-China?
itself.
That's
Yeah,
what I call my auntie too.
is it? Is her
No.
name China?
No.
Oh,
It's just
that's
a joke.
weird. Anyways,
There's stuff wrong with that.
what I
What
was
are you
gonna say
doing?
though, it's not about China becoming the dominant power.
Mm,
It's not about China versus US. It's about all nations falling.
mm.
And it's about the
Oh.
global authoritarian techno dictatorship
That's a great point.
metaverse.
Fuck the
right.
techno dictatorship. We're just pro techno tutor distributorship.
I told Max the joke about techno tutor. Like, you don't need no tutor because you have techno tutor. And he was cracking up so much about that. He was like, you're so right. You don't need a tutor because you can tutor yourself. It was so funny. He like totally gets it. Totally gets it.
It's so cool.
Wow. Wow. That's so awesome. I'm so excited to see what Max creates.
Hey man, that was crazy. The letter that he was writing by hand. That's
Yeah.
badonkadonky.
The thing that I didn't capture because I didn't really fully get what he was doing at first. Like, because when I got home that day, you know, came in the door and he's like, comes to me and he goes, what do you think Asif's favorite planet is? And I thought it was just like I don't know what he was asking me for. And I was like,
What answer did you give him? Let's see if it was correct.
actually no, I take
Uranus.
it back. Originally, he asked me what Drake's favorite planet was. I think he just misspoke. So he said Drake, but I think he meant Asif because I assumed he was talking about Drake. But I said Saturn. So my
He said
answer was for Drake.
He's a
I'm
Satanist.
clarifying that point because my answer was for Drake.
Okay, is Saturn your
Asif's-
favorite planet, Drake?
Asif's would be Uranus.
Who's
What would
it?
my favorite planet be from your perspective, Cameron? Let's see
Mars.
how accurate you are. Mars?
No, I'm telling you the correct answer. You can disagree.
My favorite planet is Earth.
No, he's telling you the correct
Is a
answer.
Martian, Mitch. Okay.
By the way,
Christine, what's your favorite planet?
Earth.
We
Duh.
both have the same favorite planet.
Just for the record, my favorite planet is not Uranus, but that being said, do you guys know what Uranus means?
But you said but.
It's pretty
well,
cool.
it's
That's
the
fine.
god of that's Kronos. I don't know. What is it? I don't remember.
The sky personified as God and the father of the Titans.
Titans.
Yeah, it's the sky personified as a god.
Hmm.
Isn't that
Uranus is
crazy?
father of the
This whole time I'm
Titans.
thinking it's the depths of my anus,
Mhm.
but it's really the top
Everything's in
thing.
reverse,
Yeah.
Asif.
That's
Oh my
totally
God.
understandable that you would.
It's
Wow.
the gas clouds.
Uranus. It's really pronounced Uranus.
Uranus.
Anyways, so yeah, so continue. So he asks you in your
Anyway, so context wise, he was really asking me about your favorite planet. So, anyways, later, a few minutes, like he comes back, just a moment later, and he's got this envelope, and on the front it says it's got a sticker or not a sticker.
wait. Why did you answer Saturn for Drake?
It's just the first thing that came up, and did you know the Nike swoosh is like actually the ring of Saturn?
What does the Nike swoosh have to do with me?
Nike swoosh is the ring of
you're-
Saturn?
Wait, hold on.
'Cause
But
you're
wait,
black.
one step
Cam
at a
has
time.
just been trying to tell you, just do it, Drake.
It's because you're black. I'm just telling you, it was like word association. It was like, what do I know about Drake? Black, Nike, Saturn, done.
Nike.
This is how the mind of a white supremacist thinks, guys.
Good. Now we can write hate
Canceled.
articles.
Canceled.
So,
I'm just canceling myself. Then I don't have to get up on Sunday morning.
just to
Christine's over here. Cancel.
that I don't have
The
to
original
get
cancel.
on Saturday, Sunday morning. So just to clarify, Drake, did you ever tell Cameron that your favorite planet was Saturn?
I don't know what my favorite planet is.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Apparently, it's
That's like when
Saturn.
people say, like, what's your favorite color? And you're like, I gotta fucking decide. And then every time you just stick with that same answer, and you're like, I guess that's my favorite color. And then you start to like convince yourself through auto suggestion that it is your favorite color.
Hey, actually, you have a favorite color?
Next thing you know, you're painting your walls that color.
Mine's blue. I just made it really easy on myself. Like,
I thought blue was too like common, so I wanted to be special.
what's yours green?
I think so. I don't even remember. Then I changed it to gold. I was like, ooh, gold. I'll be like first place.
Fair enough. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
So,
Okay,
anyways,
okay.
he comes back to me with this, envelope with we have these forever stamps in the United States where it's like you buy them one time and you can use them anytime, and it's like for sending a letter. And it's Saturn. So he had these like the stamps that he had been given or something, and it has Saturn on it in the right place, but on the front it said from Max, and on the back it said to Asif. And he had written all of this himself. Okay, no asking how to spell something, whatever.
So this is fascinating point is like you guys don't do writing class with him.
Well, I'll get to that. Let me
Okay.
finish because that's not it.
yeah,
Right? So
yeah. Wow.
then we're sitting down at the table. This is all within the span of like maybe 10 minutes maximum, right? So
Maximum.
I posted a picture. Yes, Maximus.
No, Max.
I posted a picture because I'm like, hey, can I take a picture? So I took a picture of that, right? And then I posted it, and everybody's commenting on it, right? How cool that was. But then I go sit down at the table. This is within about 10 minutes, and he's writing a whole letter to you. And I was like, oh dang, I should have waited. I thought that was it. I thought it was just like that was it, you know. And it's got like this letter, and I'm trying to remember what it said. It was like,
I can't wait to come visit you again, or something like that.
no, I think it said I think it said I like you or something.
Right.
I'll look it up, but it said like I like you and I can't. Oh, here it is right here. It says Asif. I'll show it to her. I like you and I would like. Where's my screen?
Zoom in. No, you have to zoom into the picture. Oh, here we go.
I like you.
Yeah, Asif. It's not a big deal. Asif, I like you, and I would like. And then on the back it says to visit you. Here, I'll show everybody the. Let me put it on my screen, because then it's easier for me to.
Uh-oh.
Oh no, it doesn't work. Oh well.
Try again.
It's okay. It was good. Just zoom in a bit.
So you can just see him
Okay.
writing the words, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
And then so the back says to visit you. But then trying to find the rest. Oh, and then here he is, and then he keeps going and he's writing bye bye. BYE.
Yeah.
So he was like, oh wait. And he writes bye bye on it, right?
And then he folds it in half and like puts it.
I showed him
into the
how to
envelope.
fold it because at first he was just folding it and I'm like showing him how you get it to the same size as everything, right?
Uh-huh.
And then he put it in there, and then the only thing so when he started to write visit, right, he wrote VI, and then he stops for a moment and he was like, and he looks at me because I was standing over his shoulder trying to like get, take a picture right, and he was like, how do you spell visit? And I was like, well, what do you think? And he goes, and then he like wrote the rest of it, right? So like I didn't help him spell any of that stuff. Like it's coming from him, right? And
grammar
again, he just turned
perfect.
5 at the end of October, right? So yeah, his grammar, everything.
Awesome.
And yeah, the point you were making, we don't do any focused writing practice. The only thing we'll do is we'll correct them when we see something, like if they're writing their S's backwards. So I think on that one, he actually wrote them correctly. I'd have to double check.
You said there was some letter that you're like, oh, there.
Yeah, these ones are correct. And he did this one, apparently, Katie was saying something about like, he wanted to practice writing proper S's. Because I had found a recipe he was writing prior to that. I found it later. And it was a recipe for these tortilla strips that Katie was making for like this soup. And in that one, the S's were backwards.
Mm-hmm.
So same day, and she had corrected him, and then he was writing this letter to you, and all the S's are correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but we don't do any. So we're not like, okay, sit down, and now you need to practice writing some letters, and here you go. Like we've given him books, and they've, on their own, they'll go and they'll play with it, but it's not like he's sitting and focusing and doing.
Like
it.
he has writing utensils and paper available to him that he just goes.
Yeah,
and uses. Yeah.
and I've bought like books that have like drills. But
Right.
I've just given them to him. I'm not like, you got to sit and do it. Sometimes I'll be like, hey, remember this book? Check it out. It's got these things. You can look at it. But he's not like sitting down doing that over and over. He might have done it like a few times or something.
You know what's funny is like in a daycare setting, that's like all day, well, not all day, but every day for 20 minutes, the kids are just drilling letters. They're just like going through that every day. And still at the end of, 6 months, a year, whatever, they're 4 or 5 years old. At the end of that stage, they're like, they still don't know even what the letters are called. They're like,
Yeah.
I don't
And so
know.
when I tell people
So
we didn't
absurd.
do any drilling, it's like, okay, so he must be just smart or something. And it's difficult for people like when they haven't seen Technotutor and they haven't got the full context of what we call a presentation, meaning where we explain all the context of it and how it fits into education and all that stuff, which is the purpose of the presentation. When you haven't got all that, you don't really have the reference point context. So you kind of try to put it into 1 or 2 categories. Like, okay, either you got to drill it in or you're just naturally good at it. And it's neither of those.
Right.
We use Technotutor and integrate it. It's like,
Well, the thing that we conflate is something coming naturally to you, like automatically to you, and it being inherent, like you were born with it. You see what I'm saying? Like something can come, like it can come as autopilot to you, but it doesn't mean that you were born with it. right? You can program points of making them natural and automatic to you, just like eventually, like every basketball player, right? You can have predispositions based off your muscles and body and things like that. But it's like, unless they drilled it in them when they were children, right? As children, because it's a physical movement, it's like it won't come naturally for them later.
And anybody who's like, well, LeBron James was a natural, it's like, okay, but how many hours a day did he practice?
Right. Exactly.
So sure, he had some talent, but how is that relevant? And at the end of the day,
but how would you know? Like how would you know he had talent? Like if you're 5 years old, was he dunking on people or like, you know?
Yeah, and like, or was he doing drills all day when he was 5 years old?
Right.
And was he around basketball? And like, but also, what about every other person in the NBA who's not LeBron James?
Right.
Okay. They are not having the same level of natural talent, I would assume. And yet they did all the practice and they were able to get to that level. Right. So it doesn't mean, but the point is there may be some talent point that plays into that, why they're at that highest level. But if you want to just become effective, don't worry about talent. You know what I mean? Like, you can become really fucking good at drawing and not have any talent whatsoever for it. It's just a matter of whether you discipline yourself to build in that vocabulary. So it's kind of like, it's difficult to find an analogy that people understand, because people's understanding of how we learn is so skewed.
Yeah.
It's like, just like their understanding of relationships is skewed, just like their understanding of life and meaning and purpose and science and everything is totally fucking inverted, screwed, skewed, like everything. It's so they think they know something when they don't know anything, actually. So they're trying to fit what we're saying into what they know.
What is that line that David says in reference of Bernard? You're inside the box.
Something about being outside the box.
It's like you're inside the box trying to question the box. How stupid can you be?
Yeah.
Like, whoa.
Wow.
Drake, were you gonna say something? You were holding up your waffle fork for like a moment.
Yes. I was gonna say something. That's why I haven't eaten this yet. So I can have my mouth free to say things. But it's that point of like, people have such a skewed idea of what learning is. And Asif, you've brought this up so clearly before, so simply, of like, you think learning is when you quote know how to do something. Like you just, I get it now. I learned something, right? And it's like you have this cognition. It's like, no, you actually have to go out and do some shit. You actually have to, when you learn it, when you actually know it, that's when you're actually doing something for real. And people get off on having that cognition. I'm one of those people. I get off on having that cognition. Like, I just fucking figured something out. Right. Because like in school or whatever, that's all you had to do.
Right.
I figured it out. Boom. I'm the winner. I'm smarter than all you other fuckers. Let's go. Right.
It's so true.
But in real life, you actually have to apply yourself, be disciplined. There's all these steps. I love the video that you made, Mitch. I think it was this last week. No hurry, no pause. Right. And
That's
everyone was commenting that on the self-perfected hangout and then the TT support afterwards.
Gotta watch that video.
Yes.
Highly recommend.
So good.
Which one?
It's
No
called
hurry, no pause.
What I learned from a Navy SEAL or something like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's called What I Learned from it. Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah, I didn't even see that you uploaded it.
It's a great video. It's a great video because you give the context for it, but it's something that I think everyone experiences of you're going through something and then you get overwhelmed with it and you're like, fuck, you feel like you need to take a break, or you feel like I'm not moving fast enough, all this shit in between, right? And it's like your mind is oscillating you between the extremes to get you to just end up giving up or sitting out or not doing what you need to do to get the result, right? And the real discipline that most people don't have is continuing on until you actually get the physical result, the real result. Most people stop at the, I got the cognition and now I know, no, everything's changed. That's life.
Yeah. That's how people stay trapped in that box. It's like the box of the mind where you can have that dopamine rush of like, oh yeah, I figured it out, or I realized if we could just do this XYZ, we can change the world or whatever. And then you just stay fucked because you're in the box, right? And you
Right.
don't actually go and do the damn thing. It's really not that hard to do the thing as long as you have the tools and you have the system. It's just being willing to walk through the emotion and the pain of failure or rejection or things like that. That's also why you need a relationship.
Mm.
Some people may not see that this is relevant, but I'll just explain. It's like when you're out there building a business, it fucking sucks some days. Like you want to talk to people, you get like 3 people in a row that are like, I don't want to talk to you or whatever, right? You face that rejection, all that stuff comes up. You know, you're out there like 8, 10, 12 hours in a day on, focused and building. And you have some wins, some losses, everything in between. But then if you come home and you don't have, or you're wherever you're at, but you don't have that female partner with you to be there, to listen to you, talk to you, support you, hang out with you, right? All of that. You're gonna be very limited in your ability to then go back the next day and do it, and then the next day and do it. But like, that's why, I mean, all of us have had so much success in business. And I'll just speak for myself. It's like so I've consistently hit, record quarters ever since I started TT. But it's because right at that same time, I then had Jessica in my life, and it's amazing. But for anyone who's, I find this so fascinating. Like some people, there's almost kind of like the no hurry, no pause. Maybe there's like a rendition of it. It would be like something with having a priority, like a clear priority, but then also being able to handle multiple aspects at once. It's really like both at the same time. For example, right? A lot of people will say, oh, I just have to focus on getting my partner. I just have to focus on hitting my business numbers. I just have to focus on moving or whatever. It's like, yes and no.
It's like a comprehensive thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's some bullshit. Like if you're like, oh, I'm not ready for my partner because I just need to make some more money. It's like, fuck you. You're never gonna actually make the money
Or
unless you
vice
have the
versa.
partner. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So
how do you,
really
what
have
would
to
you
be involved.
suggest for those people, right?
Well, if you don't have techno tutor, you're not going to be able to handle that level of information because you're not able to process it. How do I know that? Because you don't already have the result. If you did have the programming, you would have the result. So that's telltale sign number 1.
So good. That's
Yeah.
so good. Like just on that point real quick. It's like people think that, and we were kind of going to talk about this on Friday, but people think that you can just go out and wing it, like, oh, I'm just going to wing it and everything's going to work out. It's like, if that was going to work out for you, you would have already done it.
Yes, exactly. So that's where, boom, brutal self-honesty comes in, punch you in the face. Now, the other part is like, so how would you handle that, right? If you're realizing, oh shit, I got to improve my relationship, I got to improve my business, I got to, change where I live, I got to do all of this stuff. It's like, then if you do have techno tutor, because that's going to be the first step, is then using the tool every single day in a way that's going to help you look at both the good, the bad, and the ugly of where you're at, build in the new vocabulary, and then go do the damn thing. Like it's a lot of times, at least for myself, when I first got techno tutor, I thought, oh, it's going to just help me automatically do the thing. It's like, it's really interesting. There's this other point I was reading in the Creation's Journey to Life blog by Bernard Pullman. He was saying how in life, like in this whole process, right, of developing ourselves, like you will be supported, but you will also not be fully supported because it has to be your own directive will. Like you have to support yourself, right? It's not all going to be done for you. And a lot of us have fallen into this trap, myself specifically, like listening to Kevin Trudeau thinking, oh, it's just source energy. And if I can just be in alignment and feel good, it's going to just work out. It's like, that's such a bitch way of looking at it because you're just thinking that the emotions are going to solve the problem for you or the feeling, which is just stupidity. It doesn't work like that. So it is really this balance of realizing, hey, if you are aligned with principle and life and doing what's best for all, there will be support, For example, we're here to support you. We're making this podcast.
Yeah.
And simultaneously, we can't do it all for you. That would be that wouldn't be out of your own
So we
volition.
have Lisa here. She says, "Good morning, everyone." And she's also asking, is experience the best teacher then, with all that being said?
Experience the best teacher.
There's always
mean,
a balance.
Experience is a teacher, but it's not the best teacher.
But what does it mean? Because like if I have a starting point of I want to abuse people, and then I go and have those experiences, and then I constantly am not self-honest and I blame everybody else for why there's consequences, then what is my experience teaching me?
So
Yeah.
it's part of a whole picture where you have to be living the principles. And if you're living the principles and you say, I need to go out and share this, for example, you're going to learn more than you ever can just by thinking about it, for sure. But it's not like a either or kind of thing where it's like the only way to learn is by going and do it. It's like you also need to have the relationships where you get to talk to other people. Because what I was going to say, based off what Mitchell was saying, which is good timing for this question. Great to have you here, Lisa. It's great timing for that question, because what Mitchell was saying was, if I could sum it up at the end, was it's not that you just align yourself with the point and then the wave will just come and sweep you and you're good to go. It's more so that the support that you get will support your movement. If you're already in motion, it'll help you move faster. The reason why it was so easy to work with Mitch is because it was always it was not hey, I'm projecting all these limitations and I don't want to do anything. He did that himself. So when he would chat with me or Kian or Cameron or Drake or whatever, like when he was just beginning is what I'm talking about, is he would be like, hey, I already tried these things and this is the feedback I'm getting. What do you do? I'll say, oh, that's great, man. Like, okay, cool. If you're getting that feedback based off my experience, this is what it would mean. And he's like, okay, bye. I'm going to go figure it out now. I don't need your help anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Because his starting point was to move.
Yeah. And it's like, it's like how do I put this succinctly? It's like we're always looking for kind of this easy way through the difficulty. Like, oh, if I can just make this one decision, it's just going to help, and I'm just going to then break through or whatever.
Right.
But what I've come to realize is that in every single moment, like literally in every breath, you have to direct yourself. It's not like you can just make one decision. Now you're course corrected and now everything's going to work out perfectly for you. Granted, right. You still can. There's some pretty amazing breakthroughs, for example, I've had with TechnoTutor, where if I will put in a certain phrase or word or concept, I will have a huge cognition and now my life is forever changed. So that does happen. But then there's then like the next wave that comes in, and then I have to still direct myself in the moment. And then I'll have another breakthrough and it's like, oh, wow, I can realize this. But then it's like again and again. And so it is really this like accumulation of taking responsibility, going to the next level, stabilizing at the next level. But then it's like in every single breath, you still have to keep directing yourself. Otherwise, your mind and your ego is going to sweep you back up and like, oh, well, justification, projection, bullshit.
So there's all these like one-liners that are all always going to be contradictory in the context of the how, which is like, patience is a virtue. Like, is patience a virtue? Yes. The early bird gets the worm. Is making the first move on something and being impatient and moving right away virtuous as well.
If the worm was late, he wouldn't have got eaten.
Right, exactly, right? So it's always this point of when you're focused on the how of like, what's the best way to go about things? It's circumstantial. That's why the only thing you can ever do is be principled.
He said circumstantial, not circumcision.
Yes. No.
Circumstantial. Yes. The only thing you can ever do is be principled, because that is like a self-definition where it doesn't matter what situation you go into, you're already predefined that you're going to do what's best. You're going to be self-honest. You're going to take responsibility. And as long as you have those points, then it doesn't matter if you're getting the experience yourself, if you're learning from somebody else, you're always just looking at how can I, in relation to whatever situation I'm in, take the most responsibility, be the most self-honest, create the best result for all.
That is how God would carry himself, itself, herself, their
they
self, themself,
Thyself.
Zer self.
Zero self. Yeah.
But like, let's just
term
say
self.
instead of God, see the problem with arguing about the gender of God is there's an assumption that there's one God,
Yeah.
Mm,
like the God, and it's
Mhm.
like your God.
yeah. There's 7 billion
Okay,
gods on the planet right now.
So my point though is the way we idolize God is that it would be an individual who carries themselves exactly like as if just described, like always within principle, taking responsibility, being honest with themselves, looking at how they can interact in a way that's best, solve a problem.
Mitch just had a
give
great
support,
post.
receive support.
He had a great post about saying like what integrity is. It's when it doesn't matter if you're around people or not around people. There's 10 million people watching or 0 people watching. You'd make the same move.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter.
That takes such brutal self-honesty and time to prove, but it's kind of like, don't delay. There's this really great book that I've read a few times. It's called The Self-Made Billionaire Effect. And it's, read it all with a grain of salt because they're researchers researching shit and all that. But I do like to, investigate everything, keep what's good. And what's fascinating how they broke down the book. They're apparently these 2 guys that research all these billionaires around the world and try and distill what makes them the billionaire. Obviously, there's a ton of flaws even in that premise. But what's cool is they broke down the book into like 6 or 7 pieces that each billionaire tends to exhibit. But they break it down in terms of these paradoxes or these like, they're like polarities. They're like directly opposite. So for example, like one phrase that has really stuck with me, they call it patient urgency. So like these billionaires they're very patient because they're planning for the long term, but also in the right moment, they'll be very urgent. But there's another one called like inventive execution, right? Because if you're inventing, typically you're not executing, you're like thinking. And if you're executing, you're not usually inventing. So they like merge these words together, which I found to be very cool. So of course I put them all in my TechnoTutor. And now it's like I can handle looking at kind of these different what people might think would be like these polarities that don't blend. But now it's like you can integrate it. And then here's the best part, because someone might now get off on like, oh my God, self-made billionaire. Oh, I could do that. Oh, patient urgency, yes. But then they're gonna go fucking do something stupid today and not actually live it. So here's the real test again is we can say all these nice buzzwords on the podcast or whatever. You can read these nice buzzwords in a book, but then are you actually brutally applying that in your life and looking at it? Like I have a phrase, I call it self-reflection Sundays, where I do my best every Sunday, really every day, but Sunday specifically, just because there's a lot of different types of stuff in my schedule on Sundays, where I just really try and take a good look at my last week of like, did I actually do the shit I was going to do? What happened? What was good? What was bad? What did not work? And I just look at it, even for a couple minutes. And then this week I do the same thing. And then you do that over and over and over and over and over. And it's like this really cool property. It's like you download this way of looking at your life where you can then really trust your whole process of how you're evolving, because you can see over time, if I like consistently didn't do this one activity, then I'm like, okay, this is clearly a problem, right? Or what, like this past week, I realized, oh, wow, I did these 2 things. That is actually such a game changer. Okay, I got to just keep doing that and then add more and then add more.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I want to go more into this point of, well, actually, before I do that video you made, Asif, you and Melat, I really suggest everybody watch that video. It was called like something like the number 1.
What you're getting wrong in your relationship.
What you're getting wrong in your relationship.
Tea
Is
time
that on your
with
YouTube?
Mala. No, it's on my Facebook.
It's on his Facebook, but everyone should watch that. You should put it on YouTube.
Yeah, well,
Gotta
that's a
make
good
that. But it's in the context of what we're talking about, where the basic point you made, I want people to listen to it, but I want to give context too. The basic point that you made, which I agree with, is people in the context of in a relationship between 2 people, like husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend type thing.
You sound a little bit quiet.
Me? Oh,
Yeah.
My mic is like on the other side of my desk. Is it any better now?
Yep, yeah, that's great.
Okay, yeah, it was like way over there. I wasn't even paying attention to it. people, when they're in a relationship, they will tend to, well, it's not tend to, it's just, this is a problem that we see, is like, if there's a conflict, they'll come to somebody else for support as like sort of a sounding board for advice and so forth. But they're only bringing one side of their side to it. They might be trying to give the other person's side, but it's coming from them, and they haven't really communicated with their partner yet and tried to sort it out there, and then get support when they need support. Instead, it becomes an avoidance of communicating with the other person. Am I doing it justice? Yeah. And so that same principle applies in what Mitch was talking about. It applies in everything, where it's like, we want it in religion, everything, where we want someone else to just fix things rather than us being the solution and then going and getting information that we can apply. Instead, what I find when people come to me for support, because I do exactly what you guys are talking about, I make it about them. And I try to support them to see, like, what's the points you need to change for this to change, right? Mm-hmm. And typically the person's starting point when they're coming to me is, how can you help me fix the other person? Always. I mean, there's cases where obviously if I talk to you guys, in a lot of cases, you're not doing that. But I'm saying, when this is
a really good point. Just to clarify how that sounds, is like, I'm having a problem with my partner. What is it that my partner needs to change? Like, how do I get my partner?
Yeah, like, I'm trying to get them to do this and this and this, and they won't do it. And I don't know how to, what did you do to get Katie to do that, or something like that?
Right, exactly.
Well, and then I'm like, okay, but what's the actual problem? And then you start asking questions to figure out what's really going on within them, so they can go back to within themselves. And it's like, I was just looking at this from a bigger perspective, right? Because like, I was joking around before we started recording, I was looking up, because I was watching some random video on YouTube. It made me think about Dostoevsky. So I started looking it up on YouTube, or on my Amazon, and I was ordering some books. And then I was looking at what book I want to get. And the person was talking about this book called Notes from Underground. And one of the themes is this Russian nihilism that was coming forward in that time when it was written, I guess in like the 1800s or something. And then I started kind of connecting all the points of, like, you've heard this term of, like, the death of God, postmodernism, or modernism, all this stuff, right? I was just looking at how all that comes together in our current reality, right? Because people talk about the death of God as if it's sort of like this thing that happened.
God
and
died.
We're past that.
But
what does it mean? It means, in terms of how people talk about it, what I understand what it means is the Enlightenment values, all these points, science, all this stuff came up, and it's like, we don't need religion anymore because we can solve everything with science.
Right.
We have knowledge, we have information, we can solve it that way. And that's when the ideas of utopias came about. But then along with that came this whole point of authoritarianism, of like, well, everybody's retarded. So clearly we don't mean everybody's enlightened. We mean a few of us are enlightened. So we need to determine the reality for everybody else using science and all this stuff. But the problem is, the people who are the quote enlightened ones are just as retarded as everyone else. They have a higher vocabulary in the context of the system, but they're not doing things based on real principles that's best for all. Because if they were, their chief primary mission would be to educate everybody effectively, equally, so that no one's retarded anymore. That would be step one. But I was just looking at that in that context of how atheism has sprung up as a reaction against, the feeling of, it's like rebelling against traditions that don't make sense, that feel stifling. Right. But sometimes you could throw the baby out with the bathwater. And like, I was one of those people where it's like, oh, marriage, that's retarded.
I think everybody does that. When they wake up from something that they're being lied to about, they throw out the entire thing.
Yeah, it's like, I got to get rid of everything, like marriage. But then it's like, I'm not a man. I'm gender fluid, and I'm this. And it's like, it goes to an extreme where you're like literally removing all structure that would sustain your life.
It's like investigate all things and keep that which is good. It's like investigate all things and throw out everything that's just
It's
like-
just
It's like when they were,
just,
they were like, when we don't need walls, and it's like what about cell walls and plants? Do we need to get rid of those walls? Are those racist too?
like yeah,
so-
no more borders. You're like no
No more borders.
borders.
Oh, my cell membranes are just collapsing. Like, okay,
Yeah.
where's the context that it actually is relevant? Like, because maybe from the perspective of the cells in your body, you're the fucking colonizer. Like, so where do you draw the line, right?
It's like we
Um,
need bathrooms where men and women. You know what? We should just remove bathroom walls. You have to
Just
shit
piss
where
in the
you
street. Well, San Francisco's testing that. They just piss in the streets. But my point is, there's the reaction, which is not principle based. It's a reaction. So I was just
Problem,
looking at
reaction.
I was looking at how, okay, we get rid of God because we don't want, like, because look at all the abuse that was justified in the name of God. And even
Right.
somebody who's listening to this, which, I mean, what are the odds of that? It's probably very low. Someone's listening to this and they're super religious, okay? But, there's going to be those people at some point.
Yeah.
And they're like reacting because we're saying like, oh, you don't need God in your life. So they're like, oh, what are you talking about? Like you're heathens, you're atheists, you're demon worshipers. You just want people to kill each other and all this. And it's like, well, obviously not. But look at from the other side. Look, has there been abuse justified in the name of God?
Yeah.
There has. And you could say, well, but those people are not actually godly and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, but that's not the point. The point is that word has been used to abuse. Okay. Now the problem, okay. The problem is if you throw out God completely, then what do you get?
No
Heathens.
principles. No.
Yeah, well, what you get actually is look around at the world.
Mhm.
You get the pandemic, lockdown, you get the metaverse, you get all this shit that's going on. You get dictatorship, authoritarianism, fascism, all that stuff. Because there's
sense
no
of authority.
well, it's yes, but now we have to look at, okay, the problem all along. See, from my perspective, it wasn't any better. Okay, so let's go back before when there was God. Okay, when God was the prominent point in everyone's life. And how was things back then? Like it was like a fucking utopia then? Like I mean, think about when God was the forefront of everything in a person's life. You're talking about the fucking Middle Ages.
Before that.
Okay. And was it so great?
It was fantastic.
Right?
Gosh.
But you see my point?
People are dying of dysentery.
Yeah.
Unreal, dude. Have you not?
Yeah,
but
played the
also,
Oregon-
like,
Oregon?
But also
There was no
were
real equality. There was
crusades
fucking kings and
before
queens.
that,
It was
yeah.
like, give me a break. It was not, there was never a time in history where things were great.
Pause, Christine. Tell us what the comments are saying.
We have 12 people watching, no new comments, but
That's too many people.
I'll add
We
in
gotta
my
shut this
own.
down. Oh, go ahead, Christine. Christine.
Like what's Cam's pointing out, it's like the class system has always existed, whether it be God in power or like the government. It's like it's always been the yeah, but like it's always been like, even when you think of like things like Game of Thrones or something, like that's like fantasy, but it's like, who are the poor people that can't read, people that like literally living in the streets. And it's like we literally have like this like society has just evolved in the exact same way, where it's like, okay, now we have technology, but still like the dumb people are the illiterate ones. And that's something that's just been really like suppressed, or like now with the system, it's like, well, yeah, like it's being done on purpose, which is what John Taylor Gatto like makes so plainly in his videos.
We were talking about this, like about how in the past the kings and queens would just be like, oh, that person over there, I want that land. You know, they talk to King Jimmy over there and like, hey, King Jimmy, I want your land. And King Jimmy's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not giving that to you. And then the other king's like, okay, everyone, King Jimmy has declared war upon us. We need to go and fight. You all need to fight for God, for your country, for the love of,
you can get to heaven.
Exactly. So you can get, so like they're selling all these people on going and doing some shit for them, for their benefit. And that's literally what we still have today, because people are not able to see that. And like people are so illiterate, so retarded, and the practical sense of the word, that it's like people still believe in God or higher authority, and they don't have the understanding to really just practically stand back and go, why are we here? Okay, what would actually be best? Is creating a war, does that even make sense? Does having a king even make sense? Does like paying taxes even make sense, really? And just bringing it to the very practical level of, okay, let's create a world that works for all of us. And then we wouldn't have to have war. We wouldn't be persuaded by this person says to go fight with that country or whatever. It's like, no one's going to do that, right? There was another point that I wanted to make. You were bringing up God and structure. And one of the definitions of structured is resembling a living organism. And so like a structured society resembles in itself a living organism because of all the moving parts, but also because of the structure that we have, the laws that we have in place, the rules that we play by. It guides and well, obviously it guides, but it moves in a certain way. Our society moves in a certain way where it creates these circumstances that we continue living out, which is, okay, you have to go to work, which means that your parents can't be around for you, which means they put you within a school system, which means that you end up getting abused because your parents aren't around. They're not there to support you. Some random person is placing their abuses on you, all of that, which then creates the people within our society who grow up to not question the abuse, or if they do question it, they're not actually doing anything about it. They're just part of the system. They're, a symptom of the system. And that ends up becoming what influences the next generation. That is in itself, that structure is the God, so to speak.
But that's leading exactly into what I'm saying, which is the problem, whether you are pre-death of God and everyone believes in God, or now where it's like, oh, you don't need God and all this stuff, and it's rejected. The problem is people are placing the authority outside of themselves. And so if you're like, well, we need to get back to a time where everybody believes in God, because that's what I see is like, oh, the problem is there's no more God in their schools and there's no more God in everything, right? And it's like, okay, let's go to that time then. Okay, now everybody believes in God. Then what? Because like you were pointing out earlier, like you made a really good point earlier, even when that was the case, God was still, that was used as, well, I mean, here's the problem. You can't fucking hear God talking.
Right.
And if someone comes to you legitimately, even as a person who believes in God and is like, look, God told me I need to do X, Y, and Z, you would in yourself be like, that person's crazy. Because at the end of the day, if they were like, well, they told me I need to go steal this thing, you'd be like, well, but God wouldn't tell you to do that. So it's like, well, who are you to question what God said to them? So everyone knows deep down that they're the one that is making the value judgment as to what God is saying and what God isn't saying. And this is the problem, because all you have to do is get enough of the population illiterate effectively, and then one person who's very effective at speaking and is able to convince everybody that they speak for God, and then they control everybody. So the problem, though, is not...
Hang on. You know what else is a really big problem within that is this personification of God. That's a huge problem within this, because it's like what actually ends up doing the things that we say God does is the structure or the system that we all participate in. And so it would be the same thing as saying like your computer is like, he is so angry with me, and that is why he will not open this application.
That's really funny.
But isn't it?
Okay,
yeah,
but that's what I'm getting at. Meaning, because we're, like you said, personifying God, we're not taking direct responsibility. It's like we're saying that there's already an individual who's going to direct everything for us, so we don't have to do that. But the reality is, by doing that, systems are created, and those systems then influence future generations and so forth. God is not having a direct effect on this world. And I mean, you might be like, oh, but God.
I love it when you talk about it as if God is like real. Like,
but it's like
God is not having a direct effect on this
people
world.
act like that. Like, oh, God is he's endowing Trump to fight the pedophiles.
Okay.
And hold on, but it's like, well, why did he allow them in the first place? And you know what's interesting is people love stories.
Yes,
they want everything to be a story. Like, well, but there had to be a hero who had an inner conflict, and there's this outer conflict, and then within that conflict it had to be resolved, and then so there had to be a hero that came, and you're like, dude, that's a fucking story. You're literally just telling yourself a story in your mind. You're not looking at reality directly. There's no God intervening. And so my point is, here's how we bring God back in. We bring God back into this world by being God ourselves.
Okay, let me in. Tap me in. Give me a tag.
Right, I tagged you.
All right, let's go.
Great God.
Okay. Everything that you're saying, Cam, and the point that I was trying to make is the reason why we have this personification of God. It's like the same way that you would personify anything else to a child who cannot fully understand it, who cannot comprehend it. It is a very low vocabulary. It's like what you would tell someone who is uneducated. That's it. This is the stories that we have is for, okay, here's how you tell somebody about there's a creator and it wants this, it wants that. And it's like, it brings you to that moving feeling of like, oh yes, he wants me to do this and do that or whatever, feel this way. He doesn't like this. But the reality is we are acting as God. And we have not taken that responsibility as God, like you're saying. And so because we have these this idea of making God outside of yourself as some being, it's retarded. Because it's a personification of what you're trying to understand is actually the entire system, but you've made it into a person who has his own whims and desires, and like, you know, you're just going to follow that whim or desire because
that's genius, dude.
That's what you're supposed to do, right?
That's genius.
Thank you.
God being a personification, that's genius.
It's a low vocabulary understanding of God.
It's like the reason we have Greek mythology and all this stuff.
Yes.
It's like Echo was some god that, you know, this guy was really fucking frustrated. So he went into I don't remember the story, but it's like going to the mountains and he was like, blah. And then Echo called out to him and he was repeating back to him what he was saying.
Or they would take, for example, like anger and like the experience and emotion of anger that would overtake you sometimes. And they would, in a way to describe what that is, it would become a god.
Yeah.
And so it's a way of objectifying a concept and then putting it there so you can describe it and so forth. But then what happens is it makes a nice story and then you start telling stories about it. And then suddenly the object, this God has a life of its own and it becomes a person. You're like, hold on, I was just trying to tell you about anger. Like, I didn't want you to go and take it like there's a God who is like, is anger. Like, what? No, like that's not it.
I can't stop myself. It's like, okay, this is the limitation of analogies. This is the entire limitation of analogies. Way back when people were not very intelligent, they used analogies to try and like get you to understand something. And then those analogies took a life of their own. And so this is why you can't just give an analogy to someone, but you actually have to build your vocabulary. They have to build their vocabulary. Meaning they have to build their understanding. They have to build their education. That's why we have to educate everyone on this planet. Because
that's what I realized within tutoring.
Yeah.
Because I did it for so long. And this was always part of the story I would tell somebody as to why I switched paths from primarily tutoring, then eventually into doing techno-tutor only. Because I would always notice, like, at best, I was really good. I mean, the thing that made me a great tutor was being able to give analogies, to tell a story, to help the person understand it in a way where they could relate to it, where they could somehow get enough in to memorize what they needed for their test. But I knew that was the limitation. Like, there was no way I could tinker in their brain and just make them able to read the fucking book directly and understand this is what a conic section is and why this is the equation of ellipse and this is the equation of parabola, instead of having to describe it in some analogous terms, just being able to understand it. Because like when I studied mathematics in university, where you're studying like analysis and other things, there's no analogies. They're like, this is what it is. This is the thing. Here's the definition. Work with that. You're not working with an analogy, with like some analog of it. And so being a tutor, I was like, the only thing I could really do was just give the person sort of a dumbed down version of it. Dumbed down doesn't mean that you're stupid. It just means it's not the thing itself. Like imagine trying to teach engineers how to build bridges using analogies. That's not going to work because it misses details.
It's kind of like building a bridge is kind of like building a relationship. Well, how do you build a relationship? Well, building a relationship is kind of like building a bridge.
Building a bridge in layman's terms.
Right. It's like you're never going to be able to build the bridge. You're going to have that feeling of about how to build bridges, but you don't actually know how to build it. What were you going to say, Christine?
So now we got Jesper here. He said, maybe talk about the minority always controlling and ruling over the majority and how we get to a world of equality where we don't need a ruling minority.
Well, okay, here's my point then. Let me just finish this point.
Yeah, and then I want to hammer
about God.
After.
I just want to finish this point about God. Let me make it clear, because sometimes people will react. Well, they react for many reasons, but this is one point people will react because within them is so deeply ingrained this point of God is a part of their life. Equals they're a good person. Equals they can feel, this is the self-honesty part, equals they can feel secure about the most terrifying thing that they know inevitably is going to happen, which is they're going to die, and everyone, their family's going to die, their grandma died, their dog died, everybody they know died or is going to die, and they're going to die, and they don't know what's going to happen. So they need to have a feeling of certainty about it, but it's not a certainty based on mathematical certainty. It's not a certainty of, okay, if I plug this switch into the, or this plug into the outlet, the electricity is going to flow because it's all been designed very specifically. It's more like this is what I hope is going to happen. And so the problem is, if you were to look at it from a objective point of view, a computer system, if you just go and randomly delete files in your computer, what's going to happen? I don't mean like your Word documents. I mean like fucking like system libraries and shit. Like what's going to happen? You're going to try to turn your computer on. It's not even going to load. And you'll be like, fuck, it's not working. So within you is this point of God that's in there that from your individual subjective perspective, if you take it out, suddenly you can't get up in the morning. You are going to experience existential dread, fear, terror. So you can't let go of that point. So that's the point that reacts when we talk about, guys, there's no God. It's not, we're not trying to create that fear within you. We're not trying to tell you everything is hopeless. We're trying to help you understand there is no God. There is death. You should be terrified, but here's the solution. So it's not that if you give it up, suddenly there's no solution. It's like, imagine if you're about to drive across this bridge and you're like, I have total belief and faith that this bridge made out of macaroni noodles is going to hold up and it's not going to collapse when I drive across it because you've so suppressed that fear that you've created this whole mythology around macaroni noodles are the most sound structure possible because you have to believe that. And I'm telling you, look, you need to let go of that belief, because if you let go of that belief, you won't drive across that bridge and die, meaning collapse, you're fucked. And then once you stop, we can get together and we can build a real bridge made of steel across that cavern, canyon, whatever. And then you can actually drive across, because that's what you don't understand is how do you get across that bridge when you die? What's going to happen? And so the problem is, going back to the authoritarian point, the minority ruling class, when everyone believes in God from the perspective of it's an entity ultimately outside of myself, even if you accept like, oh, I'm a part of God and God's a part of me and all this stuff, ultimately it's an entity outside of yourself that somehow makes everything work out in the end. But if it's not involving you as an individual and me as an individual and everyone collectively as individuals being the ones that make it work out by our effort and through our understanding and our cooperation as human beings, if it's ultimately just we're sitting back, putting our faith into it and enjoying and just going along, you may think, well, I won't be manipulated by the elite. But look at reality. If you want to talk about is experience the best teacher, it is only if you fucking look at the consequence and change. So if we look at the consequence of the masses of humanity believing in God, what has that ultimately allowed? It has allowed a minority percentage of human beings to control the majority through the fear of displeasing God and all these fucking rules and this and that. And it's like, at the end of the day, all that's happening is you have somebody saying, look, I'm going to manage this whole God thing for you. Just go to work, go along with the system, do all that stuff. And as long as you do these basic things, that thing you're afraid of, ultimately that's going to happen. It's cool. It's going to work out.
Said the priest, said the Pope, said the Imam, said the governmental.
So when I'm saying we have to bring God back within ourselves, the problem is somebody will interpret that as, oh, I have to accept God. No, you have to look at what is it that you think God is doing? What is the role that God is playing in this world? And you have to become that. Letting go of the one person being the authority, the one being, the one entity being the thing that makes everything okay. And then think about the trust we're going to have to develop with each other. If I know I can't do it on my own and there's no one entity, that means, let's just say you and I, we were the only 4 or 5 people. Right? You know, people can't see Christine, but she's on the thing. What if we were the only 5 people in reality? Well, we would have to all 5 work together. And that's scary because it's like, well, but how do I trust you guys? You see what I mean? And so I can't trust you because you're just like me, because I'm just self-interested. So you know what? There's got to be a God, this 6th entity that's way more powerful than all of us, that's going to just make all of us at the end of the day do what, somehow make it work out. I don't really know. But there's never been any point in history that's ever shown that that's the case. It's always been 2 of you got together and made the other 3 of us fucking do what you want.
Yeah.
It's always been that.
Mhm.
So my point being, if you look at the principles that we have, that we stand by, the 13 principles, those are the points that when you integrate those within yourself, they're not rules. They're not even guidelines. They're like, when you make decisions, they should be best for everybody. That's common sense.
They're programs.
Well, but what I'm saying is they're not things that you follow. They're things that you consider, and you're like, when you make a decision, you're like, okay, am I considering what's actually best for everybody? Because I have an idea of what I want to do as the decision I'm making, but would it actually be best for this person involved in this person? Or is it just best for me and this person? No. Okay, so what would actually be best? And then you look at it again, you're like, how can I come up with a solution that's best for everyone? And the answer is not always immediately obvious. You have to look at your reactions, go through all that kind of stuff. So when you look at what's the purpose of your life, none of that was taken into consideration. And so people who don't realize, even now, the ones who think, okay, all this stuff about not having God and stuff, no, you need to accept and believe in God and Jesus and all this stuff. But if you were honest with yourself, you would realize, if you really went down the rabbit hole within yourself of your life and everything you do, you would see how much you are just participating in the very system that you're so pissed off with right now. And again, look at the trucker protest thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's another example of taking something outside of you and being like, that's the savior. That's going to change it. It's going to change everything. Look, they released the mandates for having to wear masks in Alberta. So look, it's working. I'm like, guys, have you ever played chess before? You ever, I suck at chess. Okay.
Yes, you do.
And when I play chess, it's like, I'll make a move and I'll be like, oh yeah, I got him. But I'm playing with somebody who knows how to play, and they're like, yeah, okay, guy. 3 moves later, I'm like, oh, I'm fucked. Because I was putting all my attention on this one little point. And because I don't have the vocabulary and the experience and the knowledge and the everything, I didn't see, and I didn't even think about what they were thinking. And so it's like, I saw this really cool video, and I know you guys want to add to it. I just want to add this one point. I saw this really cool video about why Microsoft is going to dominate the metaverse versus Facebook. And whether they will or won't wasn't the point, but they were making this point about how like, think about this. When you ever heard people have this objection of, oh, the metaverse, we already have that. I mean, the metaverse is never going to catch on. It's not going to be this ubiquitous thing. We've already had stuff like that, you know, Second Life, stuff like that, right? I mean, that already exists, right? And it's like, metaverse is not just a video game, guys. The metaverse is literally you sit at home and you interact with reality through your fucking virtual reality headset. That's the metaverse. Like, you go to the store, you go meet your family, you go to a family reunion, you go to school, like everything you're in virtual. It's not just one game you're playing. And so the guy's point was, why did people get computers? In the beginning, nobody consumer wise really wanted computers. They were like, what's the fucking point? It's just like a calculator, right? But they got introduced through companies because companies could see that it would make their employees more productive. So then people would start getting computers and buying computers in order to be able to be productive with work and so forth, right? Hey, Jess, you follow me so far?
Yeah.
So the companies, the corporations were bringing computers into people's lives because of their work. Okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like people suddenly just went out and bought computers because they wanted to play games. Then they realized, hey, I can play games on my computer. So they brought that in there. But it was through business. It was through work. So their point was, it's not going to be Facebook, which is mostly like you're playing a game. It's just for fun. It's going to be someone like Microsoft, because who does Microsoft have relationships with?
All the businesses.
Everybody.
Right. Facebook doesn't. Meaning, how, like he said, from the beginning, 1970s, Microsoft was doing corporate contracts, working with businesses. And he says it's hard to go from selling to consumers to suddenly going business to business.
Yeah.
So when you look at the relationships that Microsoft has established and just the knowledge that's built into the organization of how do you deal with businesses, they're going to be the ones more likely to dominate the metaverse, because more likely what's going to happen is your headset's going to be given to you as a gift at your corporate Christmas party, because they want all their employees to be doing their meetings on fucking virtual reality and shit. My point is, when you think you've got the elite where you want them because you did a protest and they dropped a mandate, think about all the fucking connections that the Queen of England has with every fucking government in the world and every major corporation, because they're all at fucking Bohemian Grove or whatever. It's like, you got them in this one part, but don't you think that they've got moves and ideas and plans 30 fucking years deep? Like, they're already like, all right, guys, let's just lift the mandate. They'll stop. They'll think they won. But then what we're going to do is in 2 years, we're going to roll out this other thing. And then suddenly everyone's going to be doing this. And by the way, remember this? What happened after Trump won? What did they say?
This was like, we'll never let this happen again. That's what they said.
And did they?
No, they didn't.
What did they do? What did they change?
They changed rules around voting.
Not just that was part of it, but even more specifically, remember, it was like something like 37% of Democrats said they would not have voted for Biden if they had been aware of the Hunter Biden laptop thing.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But what happened the moment that Hunter Biden laptop thing came up as a news thing?
Got squashed.
Like, in the social media, they saw it going viral. They squashed it. You couldn't even share the videos of this and that. And then only like a few weeks later, afterwards, they were like, oh yeah, it actually was his laptop and this stuff. And yeah, but it was like, doesn't matter because the effect of it had already happened.
Yeah.
So in other words, in the 4 years of Trump, while they're calling him a fascist and all this stuff, they were changing the way we accept social media and the rules and the algorithms and the way they ban people and everything, to the point where they could literally ban the sitting president of the United States from Twitter.
Yeah.
They could censor major news articles and things that would have had an effect on the election that were true. Do you see my point? And obviously, look at how the media, the social media was used to pump up all of the COVID narrative and all that kind of stuff. So again, this is my point. You're putting value externally on something or some event that's going to, it's like, we're going to fight back somehow. But that doesn't mean you have to change as an individual.
Yeah.
How many fucking people are sitting there complaining about the masks and the mandates and stuff? And they're like, it's just insane that my child should have to wear a mask in school. I'm like, it's insane that your child is in school. Why haven't you fucking taken responsibility? You know, something I was telling Katie too. when I watched your video, Asif, because you guys were talking about how, I don't know if you explicitly said this, but I was considering, like, think about the group that we have. Like, when people are having a conflict, they could come to you and get support in their relationship. Like, you don't need a fucking marriage counselor.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, you might have said that. Yeah. So it's like, you don't even need one. You could literally just come to somebody in the group. And like, imagine if you have a bunch of friends, should they be your marriage counselors?
They should all be in stable relationships. And
the reason why it doesn't work, though, which is what you pointed out, is because if you do have a group of friends and you try to use them as your marriage counselors, you're only going to go and tell one side of the fucking story because you're in your fucking ego, self-interest, you're trying to win, which is the whole reason the relationship isn't working in the first place. So with the rules of our group, using that term very loosely, because we know we're working with the same principles. If I were to go to Asif with an issue, he's going to go back with the principles and be like, well, but or take it back to yourself, blah, 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 blah. Meaning, don't come and tell me.
Gaetan is the perfect example.
Right,
his story is already public, where it was just like, he was telling me, like, I can't get my wife on board with XYZ. And it's like so frustrating for all these reasons. And then I just basically told him, hey, principal is giving you, give as you want to receive. What is it that you want from her? Are you giving that to her? He was like, fuck, no. Then he just went to the tools, worked through it. And now the breast milk's flowing like crazy and she wants to come to the next clubhouse.
Here's what I was thinking. Going to a marriage counselor is like the same thing as putting your kid in school. It's the same thing as you just go out to eat dinner every night out. I'm not saying it's not fun to go out to dinner, but you don't know what's in that fucking food. It's the same thing as just entertaining yourself by watching TV all the time, only. And putting your kids in front of video games and TV. It's the same thing as going to church to take care of your spiritual fucking element.
Or going to the doctor thinking that they're going to solve your problem.
Going to the doctor and thinking that, yeah, you're going to be healthy. It's like, it's funny. I went to this clinic and I got a bunch of lab work done. Mm-hmm. And then they called me because I was like, can you let me know when the results are there? And she called me and she was like, all right, well, we got your lab work. It's all done. And yeah, the doctor said everything looks good. And just your lipids are a little high. So you could probably adjust that through the diet, but that's all. So, and I was like, okay, could I get a copy of the lab report? And she was like, oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Do you want me to like mail it to you? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I don't want your fucking opinion about it. Like, I wanted the lab report so I could look at the fucking lab report.
I had that same experience as well.
But you know what I mean? It's like, and I'm not trying to criticize them. That's just the way they do it. But it's like, he was like, oh, I read everything. You just have high lipids. And I'm like, they told me that when I was fucking 17 years old. And you just told me to change it to my diet. How? You didn't even give me anything specific, but it's like that attitude of, imagine if I was just like, oh, cool. The doctor said everything was good. I just needed to know my lipids are high. So let me go take some Lipitor or some shit. You know what I mean? Like, but it's that same attitude. And so the thing is, you can't do it all on your own. You have to do it within a group. So you can have the marriage counseling within the group because it's based on principle, and you'll be able to discern and see if someone's trying to take advantage of you. You know what I mean? Like, if you come to somebody for support and then they're not, because you can talk to somebody else and you can, get support like that. You can come as a group. Like, you should be, generally speaking, if you're not talking to your partner, if you're having a conflict, then you should both come together and get the support with the person. Because if maybe you're at a point where you're like, we can't communicate about it. Okay, but then come together. It's okay to call somebody and be like, hey, can I get support? But then the point then should be like, all right, let's set up a time where we both talk. But I want to let you.
And that was basically it. Is like, I was sharing the point of like, it's not to say don't talk to people about what you're going through. It's to say, try to solve it internally first. And then both of you should come with the understanding of, hey, we're facing this lack of education in our relationship, and we want to get that. Like, what's the missing piece that we both can't see right now that we need? And then somebody with experience will be able to share that. So it's really coming back to this point of, somebody was asking me who just became a distributor in Germany. And he was mentioning this point of like, okay, how do I get even more clear about the purpose, about my purpose? I said, there's two ways. Like, make sure you're you're reading the material that's going to expand you, the destiny material. You're listening to the Bernard audios and different things like that, because that will expand you. Listen to the audios from discussions about reality on Cameron's YouTube playlist and things like that, because that will expand you, right? But the number one way that you're going to realize your purpose is by realizing your purpose, making it real. What I mean by that is just go share Techno Tutor with somebody, support them to walk their process. And in your ability to support somebody else to walk their process, you will see the effect that you can have on this entire world. Because you'll realize the simplicity of 1 + 1. And you can never realize the simplicity in your mind. That's not a realization. That's a cognition. That's I recognize something. I understand something. But a realization is something that is real, that you make real. And the only way to do that is by supporting somebody else, because the person that you have to be in order to do that has to change, right?
And you'll see that as you do it. And
Exactly.
it'll become apparent. And you'll be getting support from somebody else. So it's not
About
like you
that
suddenly
process.
have to be the perfect example to support other people. It's like you're getting support, you're giving support. That's how reality should work.
So there are people who might listen to this, who might think, oh, I just feel like I'm alone, and everybody is helping everybody else, but not me, and I'm not getting support or whatever. The reality is because you're not supporting yourself. Because every single person who has the starting point of, I'm going to take responsibility and move forward, and I'm going to reach out for support where I need it, they're getting all the support they need. Because the missing piece is always going to be you not being on board. The missing piece to God's plan working is that you're not on board, and you're not convincing other people to be on board.
I think it's funny when people expect others to pick
Christine,
up
your
on,
voice has changed. Oh, Jess, you're here.
I think it's funny when other people expect, like if I were to expect Mitchell to recognize that I'm slightly emotional today, and that he should ask me if I'm okay or what's going on, and he should suggest what should happen to make me feel better.
Mhm.
Like, he has no obligation to do that whatsoever unless I voice to him, hey, Mitchell, I'm going through this thing. I've put it in my Techno Tutor. I've done some writing on it. I've asked for support from these people, but I'm still not clear on this specific point. Like, could you maybe give me any perspective you have on it? Or something like that, where you're clear, you're coming from a point of stability, and you've supported yourself and you're ready for support from that person, instead of an emotional manipulation of like, I just don't feel good, and you're responsible for making me feel better.
Right.
That is so key, because I
That's
know
like being a woman at level 5 million. Like, Jess, I can't believe you're not even like 25 years old. You have more wisdom than like 99.99999% of women that have ever existed.
For every guy, right? I just want to make this hyper clear, because I know I've had relationships like this in the past where the female wants the guy to be able to pick up when she's in a bad mood. I never have to deal with that with Jess. And guess what? Occasionally I'll realize something like, hey, Jess, is something off? But then that's about it. And then we'll either talk about it, or she's like, oh, no, I'm actually good. I'm just focused on this. Okay, cool. But do you guys see the difference? And now how effective I can be when I have a stable wife who's able to realize that within herself, as opposed to some girlfriend or wife or whatever who just wants to bitch and complain and expect me to then want to go engage with that.
It's funny because
So go
I
ahead, Jess.
expect nothing from Mitchell unless I explicitly ask him.
Except for me to honor our agreement,
Well,
which is
of course. So our principles, we've agreed upon all of those things, of course. But outside of that, like anything above and beyond, I have no expectations, because I know he's taking care of what he's agreed to take care of. And that's all that matters. So above and beyond that, if I ask him, hey, Mitchell, I would appreciate if we do this thing, or I would appreciate if you would do this thing, or hey, can we schedule a time for this to happen? Things like that, where I explicitly ask him. I literally, at this point, tell him how important, not only tell him it needs to happen, but tell him on a scale of like 1 to 4, 4 being the most important, where it's at, because then he can even gauge like, okay, so this is really important for her, or it's not as important, but I know it needs to get done. We'll put it on the list. And we also have lists together. We've got a shared note on our phone, and we also have a vision document where we have all this written down so it can be structured for him. Because
like for example, this this door that can open the ducts remotely without us having to go out there, like that's at least it's a high 3, right? Because it gets pretty cold here. Right. But then like, buying a bunch of extra ammunition, it's kind of like a 2, right? Because we already have a bunch of extra ammunition. So it's really great. But like, think about this. How amazing that is to have a partner that's at that level, because it's essential. And here's another key point is now when she does come to me, she says, hey, can we chat? Because this is like something, whatever. Now, because it's not like, the boy who cried wolf, where they're just always just blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay.
Problem.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, this is important. Of course, yes, you can have my attention, whatever. So,
it's cool because you can also sell him on why it's important to talk to you.
yes.
Because if it's like really important, but he's just doesn't see that
Focus
it's
on
important in
something.
that moment, you sell him on why it's important to talk about it, because it's like, okay, but Mitchell, these are the consequences if we don't discuss this. And so I would suggest we discuss it sooner than later. Let's put a time in your day today to make this happen, because I see it's very important. You kind of have to, because he's so focused on building the business that nothing is going to distract him from building the business unless I explicitly tell him and convince him like, hey, this is something that is worth your time to take away from you building the business in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's beautiful.
That's real communication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're out of
I
time.
just expect God to solve all my problems, actually. That was easier.
It's the real secret.
Next
Yeah.
priority,
Such
wanted
a
to see a
cop-out.
video of the ducks coming out of the door. Just FYI.
Well, hang on. You don't have the thing yet.
And we're going to get some chicken soon. And I just got back from the neighbors, and he was convincing me. He's like, hey, if you're going to get 4 chickens, you might as well get 10 or 20 because you're already doing the work. So you just put an extra scoop of feed.
We don't need 20 chicken eggs.
Hey, no,
But
hold on.
listen,
We might.
But he said,
I would
you
agree
can-
with
you
that.
can-
I would agree with that. If you start with 4, like 6 months from now, you're going to have 0.
Right. And then he's like, also, you can gift the extra eggs to people when you see them. You can bring them
True.
places. You can sell them. Like, it's
Guys,
just like a
we had,
valuable thing to have.
We had like 12 chickens. Now we have 4, and I get 2 eggs a day.
What happened to
Okay.
them all?
I mean, dogs kill them. They run off. I don't know. Like, stuff happens, right? So I'm just saying, like, more is
Rogue
okay.
chickens.
Now, if we were talking about something else, like, I don't know, pigs or goats, I'd be like, start with a few. You know what I mean? That would be
Yeah.
my suggestion.
But also
Yeah.
chicken, we have a much more controlled environment than you have, like with our setup. And so I'm not too worried about things picking them off as much as you would be, but
I mean, I know you've got farm experience, so I'll defer to that. But I'm just saying, from my perspective, if I could, I would start with 10. Because the problem is when you have
that's
a
what I was
few,
thinking.
from what I understand, you can't just go get more and more and more. Like, you have to phase them in certain ways, otherwise they won't accept. Like, the hens won't accept baby chicks.
Yeah,
that
you
are not
have to
theirs.
separate them until
Yeah.
they're a certain age. And then you're
So-
having to do that whole process. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is
so
easier
you're-
to get them all up front.
We should
Anyways.
categorize this podcast in the farming category.
Yeah, this was
Is
the
this a 4 priority?
This is the aftercast.
No, not yet. It's too cold. It's way too cold in Minnesota still.
Okay. Now I know.
Yeah.
But our ducks are laying eggs now. It's great.
Yeah.
The hell, our ducks aren't. Maybe they're
Um,
males. I don't know. Never thought
okay,
about it.
So
I
we
haven't
got 4
checked.
ducks. We got 4 ducks. 2 ended up being mallards, and one of the mallards ended up being a male mallard. So we're just gonna grow them for meat.
It was the one
because
we
they
initially
don't-
named him. Well, Seth named him Megatron because we had opened our top performing distributors got to name a duck, and so Seth being one of them, he named him Megatron, and then we're like, it's a female, so we named him Megatrona. So the duck was obviously very confused already.
Dude, you guys
LGBTQ
sound like
It's
a,
smart to
friendly
allow
ducks.
them to name them,
you
because
guys sound like a
let the
millennial
kids,
parent.
we let the kids name the ducks, and they're both named Sticky. So I think your naming strategy is a little better. I
And
did
then-
open it up. Drake is naming the 2 of the new pigs. So
Oh,
Nice,
Yeah,
Jay.
and then the new. So now it is actually Megatron, and Megatron's getting horny in there. So there's a lot going on in our
Yeah.
Stable.
Yeah. And also, I was researching about mallards, and they per season, so per summer essentially, they're only producing like 6 to 13 eggs. Like they're not producing many eggs at all. And so it's definitely not worth continuously feeding these ducks for no reason. One's male and one's that. So
Yeah, so we might live stream the butchering of the ducks. I'm still
we'll
contemplating.
see. We'll see.
Yeah. So anyway, okay. But I think we're at time now.
All right. Bye,
I do
everybody.
not know what we're gonna name this, but it'll be fun.
Shout out to the 15 people that tuned in. This
Hey,
whole
everyone,
episode.
leave a comment.
Oh, that's right,
For
it's
naming
time.
suggestions.
We're
Leave a
coming up.
comment.
No, this won't be up
Pedro
afterwards.
says call it Cold World.
It will be on YouTube.
Okay.
But yeah, the live stream's gonna get deleted, right?
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Alrighty.
Okay, cool.
If you're already in the Facebook group, join the Facebook group.
Come on the
If
call.
If you're already watching this on Facebook, join us on Facebook.
Hey, check out the
Like and
store.
subscribe this video,
There's some
but
yeah,
not
yeah,
yet.
yeah.
Do it on YouTube when it's
Check
uploaded
on the
later.
store. Come on,
Yeah.
find a clubhouse near you. If you're a distributor, start a clubhouse, and become God.
Let's go. Peace.
Bye.
Cool. Bye, everyone.